right, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome back to another episode of IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Don Pizzette, today with Mr. Ronnie Wong. How's it going, Ronnie?
It is going well. I do not have any reference to M&M at all. None. No, not a single one.
The candy or the wrapper?
Both.
Well, let me start off by welcoming everybody to our. We're going to have a M&M wrap-off later,
right.
But so you can insult each other more. Let me welcome everybody to the first episode of the IT Pro TV Project Management Professional Show. This is a kind of a new branch for us. Every show we've done up to this point has been hardcore IT, right? We've been setting up servers, formatting workstations, changing hardware, all IT stuff. And today, we do project management, right? This is the first of our, it's kind of like a soft skill, I think is what they call it. And you might ask yourself, why are we doing this? Well, in the IT world, more so than almost any other industry, construction may be better, but in the IT world, there are many, many things that we undertake that fall under this envelope of being a project. And if they are not properly structured and managed, they are destined to failure. Over budget, behind schedule, just terrible, terrible situations. That's one of the things that happens when a project goes stray. And so project management has become a hot button issue in the IT world over the last few years. And you really see it. You and I both, as instructors over the years, have seen the request for Microsoft project training and just general project fundamentals, stuff like that, really increasing. People want to know how to properly handle their projects to ensure the highest degree of success.
Yeah. And more we're starting to see this in the field of security, right? Where security is no longer about just setting up stuff, but really properly maintaining and then, of course, migrating as the security field is changing, as we're getting more and more threats. The constant need to update and to keep things going and keep things safe is part of more project management than it is the idea of actually having to worry about the individual products and security anymore. So you're going to see this more often in everything that you're doing in IT, especially during migrations a lot of times. Yeah.
So if you find yourself in a situation where you've got a project, and we'll talk a little bit more here in a minute about what exactly a project is, but if you find yourself in a situation where you need to manage a project, if this is the very first time, you might be scratching your head saying, well, how do I go about that? How do I do this? How do I do that? You don't want to start from scratch. And so for those situations, we have the PMI, the Project Management Institute, and they've created the PMP certification that's built around their model of managing projects. And it creates a standardized framework that says, here's how you perform XYZ activities as far as managing the project is concerned. And if you have 5 different project managers that are all PMPs, then they're all going to be managing the projects the same way. That makes it easy to compare and monitor projects, monitoring performance and all that, and it just makes things a heck of a lot more stable and consistent. So that's the real value of something like the PMI's framework, and the PMP certification is your way to designate that you know that information, that you know how to manage a project that way. So very, very valuable. All right, now, if you haven't already, I really encourage you to go and watch, we did a little intro to PMP video, just a video that it explained what the PMP was, how to get certified, how to take the exam, the requirements, because not everybody meets the requirements to take the PMP exam. If you don't meet the requirements, then there's not a heck of a lot of point in trying to pursue the certification. But the knowledge is still very valuable. So don't feel like you can't watch the show just because you don't meet the requirements. There's a lot of value in knowing how to properly manage a project, and you can use that whether you're a PMP, whether you're the project manager, or whether you're just a member on that project team. Because if you understand how that project manager is working, it makes it that much easier to communicate with them and to get information out of them. Versus if you have no clue what it is they're doing, oftentimes we think that they are stalling or creating useless paperwork when there's actually a reason for what they're doing. All right, so it's a very good information to have, and definitely a good thing to be aware of. All right, now the PMP itself is an interesting certification. A lot of vendors that are out there, like Microsoft and Cisco and so on, they have these exams, and there's no book or whatever that says what's going to be on the exam. They give you an outline, and they say, here's an outline of the possible topics that could be on the exam, and you should know these, right? And then it's up to you to go out and learn everything you can about each of those topics. Well, with the PMI, the exam is entirely based off of one book. And that book is the Project Management Body of Knowledge, or the PMBOK is what a lot of people call it, PMBOK. The Project Management Body of Knowledge, which is a collection of all the different information they have on how to manage a project. It's about 600. It's huge.
Yeah, it's gigantic.
It's a big book. And so it's a lot of information to handle, and that's where our show comes in, is that we're going to go through and kind of put it into a way that is a little more logical, makes a little bit more sense. In today's episode, we're actually going to go through part of the PMBOK. In all the other episodes, we won't do that, because the PMBOK, it doesn't read like a book. You're not supposed to read it from cover to cover. It doesn't make sense to read it in the order that the information is in there. It's designed as a reference book, more like an encyclopedia. You'd never read an encyclopedia from cover to cover. It's too many disjointed ideas slapped together. But if you want to learn about the Queen of England, and you go and you crack open the E volume of the encyclopedia, and you go to England or U or whatever it would be under, that you can go in there and find it, and there's the information you need. That's what the PMBOK is designed to be like. All right, so before we dive too much into crazy specifics or whatever, let's start off with some general concepts, ideas, theories, words, definitions that we need to be aware of for the exam. Part of the exam is not just knowing an idea, but knowing the PMI's terminology for it. They have special words, right, that they use when they refer to certain things. And you might use completely different words out in your day-to-day operations, but on the exam, you're going to get it one way, and that's the PMI way. Right. So let's start off with probably the most important thing that we're going to learn in the entire series of shows. What is a project, right? Because not everything is. And let me see. I've got, actually, I guess it'd probably be worthwhile to show the PMBOK. I've got if you join the PMI, if you join the Project Management Institute as a member, you get a free copy of the PMBOK, a digital copy, and that's what I've got pulled up here. If you aren't a member, you can go and buy them. They're not incredibly expensive. I think they're
like $60 or $70, I think.
Are they really?
Yeah.
That seems a little high, doesn't it? Let's see if we can find it on old Amazon here. A Guide to Project Management Body Knowledge.
What edition? Oh, that says
January 1, 2013. That's probably.
Yeah,
no, it is 5th edition. Yep.
It is.
All right.
Okay. Well,
so
it's $20.
Wait a minute. $21 to rent?
To rent.
What is that? You can rent things now?
I guess.
All right. Well, here we go.
There it is. Yeah.
So, so to get a paper copy is $50. To get the Kindle edition is $20. That's the way to go, right there. But you can go out and buy a copy, or if you join the PMI, you get a copy for free, so you can get it one way or another. And the PMBOK, the Project Management Body of Knowledge, is the PMI framework. This is what the exam is based on. This one book. Every answer to the exam is in this book somewhere. You just have to know it. But it's a big book. All right. So like I said, I've got my PDF right here, and you'll see that it is a pretty big document, 615 pages, the PDF. And as you go through, it breaks things down. And we're going to start off right here with just what is a project? What is project management? These general concepts. And we're going to stay true to this all the way through to about here at the end of project phases, because then it starts to go into project management processes here, and that's when things start to go kind of crazy, right? They follow a very regimented model of providing that data. It's not necessarily in an order that makes sense to us normally, right? It's kind of a barrier to learning. So we're going to rearrange everything after that point in the book to follow the chronological order of managing a project. Put it in context and say, all right, I'm a project manager. How do I work with all this stuff down here? Well, we'll put it in order from when you get started and so on. So, for example, you kind of look here in the book and you'll see stuff listed towards the end of the book. That's stuff that you would do early on in the project. So, as I move later on, let me show you an example. So,
look at 13.1.
Well, yeah, here, plan stakeholder management. You do that very early on in the project. It's darn near at the end of the book. So, so it's put in order here based on your job role. What it is that your job responsibility is. but we'll take it and make it chronological. It makes a little more sense there. But definitely good information in here. You want to have a copy of the PMBOK handy just as a reference to see the official way. And they got some nice diagrams. You can always count on the PMI to have good diagrams. So definitely worth looking at there. All right, so I want to start off with that basic idea of what is a project. And PMI has a very, very specific definition of what that project is. And it's this first sentence right here. A project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. Okay? That one sentence, it sounds really simple, but it's communicating something very, very important. That key word being temporary, right? You never have open-ended projects. Something is either a project or it's not. Projects have to have a defined finish point, a way that you know that they're complete. All right? In a company, you have two different types of activities. You have projects like these, and you have what are called ongoing operations. All right? Ongoing operations don't have an end date. They're not temporary. They're long-running. Projects are temporary.
Yeah.
So, for example, let's say that you work for Ford Motor Company, right? So a car manufacturer. And you as a company decide that it's time to create a new car. So what's a Ford?
Let's do a Ford Focus.
Ford Focus, all right. We're picking the luxury vehicle. All right, so the Ford Focus. So we decide, hey, it's 2014 right now. 2015's around the corner. So we need to design our new Ford Focus. So we create a project. Creating that Ford Focus, creating that new model for 2015, that is a temporary endeavor. You're not going to be constantly creating a new model for 2015 in 2016 or 2017, So you got a deadline too. We need to finish that design by a particular time so that we have time to manufacture the car so it's ready. And it's we're in what, May of 2014, so the 2015s are probably already out.
Yeah, probably.
So let's say it's the 2016 Ford Focus. Well, we probably need to have that done by December of this year so that they can manufacture it and get it on sale by summer of 2015, since that's what they seem to do with the models. So we got a deadline. We need a new design for this vehicle and a manufacturing process in place by December of this year. All right. Now we start to create the project around that. We assemble our team members, we come up with our work breakdown structure, all the various things that we need to do to manage the project, and we work towards that deadline. And when we hit that deadline, how do we know if we're successful? Did we finish what we set out to do? Did we come up with a design for the new 2016 Ford Focus, and is it ready for manufacture? All right, that's a project. Now when that project's done, we created a design, right? So now the company starts manufacturing that car. And they're going to manufacture not one Ford Focus 2016, right, or 2016 Ford Focus. They're going to manufacture tens of thousands, hundreds. I have no idea how many of those cars they sell. Probably hundreds of thousands, I'd imagine. You see them all over the road. So they're going to manufacture tons of them. Well, those aren't projects, right? That's an ongoing operation. They're manufacturing cars every single day. Might be different cars, but they are manufacturing cars every day. So that's an ongoing operation of the company. Ongoing operations are normally how your company makes money. Your company doesn't normally make money from projects. They normally make it from ongoing operations, right? An exception would be like in IT. If you're a contractor, and somebody hires you to perform a project, well, you're making money by doing that project. But the company that is sponsoring this project, they're not normally making money from that. They're making money from the ongoing operation of it, all right? So, for example, I might create a project here for our studio and say, boy, this light over here just seems too bright. So I'm going to create a project that is to redesign our lighting solution here for the studio. So I go out and I find a contractor, do the whole process and get them to come in and do this, right? So now I've got a project. I'm not adjusting lights every day. I'm just having them come in and do it this one time, get things set right, all right? And then we stop. Now, we don't make money because our lighting is right or because of that project. But once the lighting is right, our videos look better, people want to watch them more, and then that's how we make money. So that's an ongoing thing. When we film an episode, that's an ongoing operation for us. getting us to show up. That's the project around here. That's a all right. So keep that in mind on the exam. The key word here, temporary, right? Temporary, and it has to have a well-defined finish, some way that we know we're done, right? If you have a project that doesn't have a well-defined way of establishing if it's done, you are doomed to failure, all right? When I was a kid, Mom would give me a chore. She would say, clean the house. Well, how do you know when you're done? How do you know when the house is clean? Well, I'll tell you, as a kid, it isn't, right? So there is no finish, right? So no matter how much or how little you do, it's not done. So we need to have something that's well-defined. And we say, all right, by clean the house, I mean you need to vacuum the floor, all the dishes need to be washed, and the garbage needs to be taken out, right? That's something I can measure against. Are those three things done? Yes, the house is clean. Are those three things not done? No, it's not clean, right? So that's another part of a project. It's got to be well-defined. All right, and we're going to see that as we go through the show. Having things well-defined is really the key to success, because otherwise you can end up with, we'll talk about this later also, which is called scope creep, where if you don't define your project with rigid boundaries, your project has a tendency to grow and get bigger and bigger and messier, and before you know it, you're way over budget, way behind schedule, and doomed to failure. All right, so keep that in mind as we kind of go forward. All right, now the result of a project, when a project is done, a lot of us think of it as creating something tangible, something you can hold, but I'll tell you, in IT, that's not always the case. The result of the project might be to create a web server or a website or something like that. And then you do have something tangible. You can see this new website, right? But many times the project might be simply to create a process, right? Using the Ford example again. If we created a design there, right, the design for the 2016 Ford Focus, we didn't actually make the car. We might have done some prototypes as part of the project, but we didn't actually create the car. So we created an idea, a service, a process, right? And then that process gets used to create the actual tangible item. All right. So there are a few other terms we need to be aware of that can be kind of confused in the world of projects, right? So we have projects, portfolios, and programs, all right? What the heck are these? Well, any given company might have one project going on at once. They might have 10 projects going on. They might have 50 projects going on at once, right? So you might have many, many projects going on at any given time, right? If you take all of those projects and group them together, that is what's called your program, okay? A program is a collection of projects that have similar or related goals. In fact, I think they say that in here somewhere, but similar or related goals, all right? One of the best examples that I can think of, and we're in the U.S., so I always think of U.S.-based examples. The United States government has the United States space program, right? Our space program is headed up by NASA, the National Aeronautics. What does NASA stand for? Something. So we have NASA that heads up our space program, and they have a number of projects. Every spaceship launch, every time they launch a rocket, every time they launch a shuttle, which I guess they don't do anymore, anytime they do those things, each one is a project. But all of them are working to a similar goal, to do research and exploration in outer space. And so a similar goal, different unique projects, all grouped together into one program. Then the United States government has more than one program. So we've got the space program, but we also have the education program and other things like welfare program. Each of these different social services, each of those are programs. If we gather all those programs together, that's our portfolio. And I mean, you got to be big to have a portfolio. I use the United States government. I mean, how much bigger of a company can we think of? In the private sector, it's not often that you see programs like this. Microsoft, Oracle, HP, huge companies like that, they may well have a portfolio. Well, you use HP, right? So HP, they have various divisions inside of their companies. They have service divisions, server divisions, desktop and laptop, consumer and business. So each of those might be part of their programs, and then each program then has individual projects inside of it. So it just depends on the size of your organization. You may or may not have these three elements. but just be aware that portfolio, program, project, three distinctly different things.
Yeah, no, the example you were using earlier about Ford Motor Company itself, right? You actually can have different divisions, like their car division and their truck division again. Each of those may be programs within that. Each particular design may actually be a project unto itself, and then year by year they may be sub-projects underneath that. So again, a lot of times when you take a look at it here, you'll see that. So just about any company can actually have a number of different projects that are going on within that may be controlled by different programs that are actually under them. So just realize that everybody actually is going to fall in this somewhere in the midst of project management. You're going to actually see that's going to really, again, determine some of the ways that our project develops, depending on where we are actually in that particular portfolio and program.
You know, and you mentioned sub-projects, which I completely forgot about, and it jogged my memory about a diagram that's in the PMBOK. Let me pull this up here real quick. It looks like some kind of crazy octopus.
That is crazy.
But they're just kind of showing all the different breakdowns that you might have. See here, they've got a portfolio up at the top, and then from there it divides down. And normally under the portfolio you'll have programs, but you don't necessarily have to. It's up to your company to create the infrastructure that you want. So they show here under the portfolio, you might have sub-portfolios if you're huge, and under that you may have programs or you might have projects right under the portfolio. And then under the program, that's where you may have projects or sub-programs, and then under there, more projects. So projects are that bottom line entry, right? And when we're doing the PMP certification, it's projects that we're learning about. But you'll see there's the PGMP, right, which is the Program Management Professional. So they've got certifications for people that are operating at these higher levels, and those are out there. But for this exam, we're really just focused on projects. All right. So those are some of the different terms we need to be aware of. After that, we need to talk a little bit about what a project is made up of, right? Because a project can be a very, very big thing. It can contain all sorts of different elements and components, and it's difficult to kind of envision the whole picture. So I did a drawing, which I've got around here somewhere. Here we go. And this is basically what a project is. A project is broken up into 5 phases. Now, this is a PMI thing, right? PMI has 5 phases. You'll see other people like ITIL, right? If you start digging through ITIL and finding their project management stuff where they have 6 phases. So different vendors, different frameworks. But with PMI, you have 5 phases. You have initiation, which is just the project getting started. How do we know to start a project and get it up and going? After that, we have planning. The planning phase is, okay, we've decided to do this project. What do we need to do, right? And if you're a good project manager, this is probably where you'll spend the bulk of your time, right? You've got to figure out how many people do you need? How much money do you need? How much time do you need? Or if you've been assigned time and money, how do you get everything done with the amount of time or with the amount of money that you have? You really have to look at all the stuff that gets done in the project and what makes up those aspects, right? So arranging to get everything, setting out that plan, that schedule, that budget, all the things that you're going to live and die by as this project goes on, all right? Once all of your planning is done, then you have execution. Execution is where you actually do the work. And you know, as a project manager, you're probably not the person doing the work. You're overseeing, making sure that it's getting done. So, you know, maybe you've got a construction project, and so you're building a house. And so in the planning phase, you come up with all the different elements necessary for, you know, what it takes to build the house. But when it gets to execution, you've got contractors, you've got, you know, carpenters and master builders and all those people who are actually in there doing the work to build that house. All right. While they're building the house, you are monitoring and controlling, right? That's our 4th phase, monitoring and controlling. The monitoring piece is pretty self-explanatory. We watch, right? Is work getting done on schedule, on budget, meeting requirements, right? 3 things that we constantly watch for. If yes, great, we do nothing, right? Well, you know, you make paperwork. If no, we control, right? We step in and we correct the issue. Why are we over budget? What can we do to fix it? Why are we behind schedule? What can we use to get back? Why am I not meeting this requirement? What can we do to finish it, right? And there's actually 2 sides to this whole thing. So why am I over budget is easy to think of, but you might also have, why am I under budget, right? Why am I not spending as much money as I thought I was going to? What's wrong? What's missing? Why am I not meeting that requirement? Because oftentimes the this is a quote from Dune. The Dune books, I quote those entirely too much, but sometimes the absence of a thing is as deadly as the presence of a thing. So the absence of spending money, why not? Maybe that indicates that I let something fall through the cracks. I was supposed to order something and didn't, or contractors were supposed to do some work, but they didn't do it and they didn't bill me, and that's why I haven't spent that money. So definitely pay attention to that. And then lastly, when all the requirements have been met, when everybody has signed off on everything, we have closing. We shut the project down and we determine whether or not it was successful or a failure, right? And boy, that's a phase that a lot of people skip. You know, they just let the project kind of peter out. But it is important to do a proper closing, and we'll talk about that in a later episode. But basically, this is what's going to define that whole project. These 5 phases right here, you want to memorize these for the exam.
Now remember, since this particular certification is about project management, right, it gives us the ability, regardless of the size of the project, to essentially be able to kind of chop them down into manageable chunks, which is the whole idea behind the project management, right? Instead of just going, okay, here's things that I have to accomplish, right? We can begin with the idea of initiation, right, and just making sure it gets started correctly, and then go from that point here, without going, I wonder if the end's actually going to be okay. We go ahead and we begin the process and we follow these particular steps through. And once we do so, we'll actually see that if everybody else is doing it, it makes it very easy, like we've said in the beginning, that if we have to step into the middle of a project, we know where the project is and that we might be able to actually take over if we need to. Or, again, if we actually have to help out, we know exactly where we are as well. So knowing these 5 steps and these processes are really the key to understanding the whole of project management.
Yeah, now also keep in mind that what you're seeing here, this is the textbook definition of how the 5 phases work. But in real life, things are a little bit different. So understand that there is some deviation for this. And you'll even see that on the exam. So I created 2 diagrams. I created this one, project phases logical, but I also created project phases reality, right? In reality, it's a little bit different than what we just saw. So for example, we start out with initiation, right? Just like I threw it in earlier, and that transitions us into planning, okay? But from planning, execution and monitoring and controlling really happen at the same time, right? Some people are executing the project work, they're getting it done, and other people are watching that work to ensure that it is getting done, that it's on schedule, on budget, meeting requirements, right? So verifying that all of that is happening. Those 2 happen at the same time, all right, at least normally they do. There are some projects where somebody executes, then somebody monitors, you know, so it's one after the other, but typically they're done at the same time. And when we talk about controlling, that means, hey, something's not right. How do we fix it? Well, how do we fix it requires us to go back to planning, and we plan for our correction. And these are generally represented as what are called change management tickets. And you know, we'll go well in depth into that later on. But you're changing the project. Something didn't go as planned. Now you've got to update the plan. So we have to go back to the planning phase, make adjustments, and then go back to executing and monitoring again, right? And if everything goes great, wonderful. But if our changes don't work, if we're still behind schedule or over budget or whatever, we go back to planning again. We might cycle through these 3 phases 10, 20, 100, 1,000 times as the project goes on, moving from execution and monitoring back to planning and back to executing again, just as we go. Every change ticket that we process is really returning to the planning phase. All right. So I kind of drew some arrows to send us back. And then when the work is done, right, execution doesn't really lead to closing. So I did a little dash line. Basically, people execute. They do the work, and then they stop. And when the monitoring phase, when these people who are monitoring the system look at it and say, yes, now you meet the requirements, it's the monitoring phase that actually moves us into closing, right? But you can't do that until execution is done. So really they both point to closing, but it's truly the monitoring and controlling side that sends us there. So this diagram, this is just one that I did. It's not in the PMBOK, but it kind of shows how things really go. So keep that in mind as we move through each of the different phases. All right, well, Ronnie, looking at the time, this is a pretty good spot to stop and take a break.
Sounds good.
When we get back, we've got some more fundamental topics to cover, a few different things we need to jump into. So definitely stay tuned. And I'm trying. Sometimes I feel like I'm forgetting something. I know I've got some things I want to talk about after the break, though. So stay tuned. We'll be back after this. All right, welcome back, everybody. So before the break, we were talking about some of the general concepts, what is a project, what is project management, that kind of thing, and just kind of focused on the early parts of the project management body of knowledge. What we're going to do now is we're going to move through, I don't know, the
different terminology.
Project management dictionary.
Yeah, dictionary.
We got a couple of terms and words. I mentioned at the beginning of the show, PMI is really particular about the words that you use, the specific terms they have defined for certain meanings. So on the exam, you're going to see things presented one way and one way only. So I want to make sure everybody's comfortable with that. And so we're going to cruise through and kind of take a look at a few of these. All right, let's start with project team.
Okay.
All right. When we have a project, the project, that's that overall goal, that thing that we're trying to achieve, right? The project team are the people who are working to achieve that goal. Now, don't confuse that with the people who are actually doing the work. In a small company like us, IT Pro TV, right? We're a small company. If there's a project, the odds are every single one of us is involved in that project. So we might be the ones managing the project and the ones executing. We might be doing the actual work. But in larger projects, that's not the case, very rarely the case. So for example, the largest project that I worked on, I've dealt with a couple that were in the $2+ million range. And on a large project like that, rarely is the project manager the person who's actually doing the work. That's not your expertise. It's not what you're getting paid for. You are making sure the project is successful. So on those projects, you have a project team that consists of, at a minimum, a project manager, right? And in a small business, maybe that's it. That is the whole project team. But in a large business, you'll typically have an accountant, maybe one or more lawyers. You may have scheduling assistants. You may have clerks. You may have sub-project managers. You might have various people that are involved not in actually pulling off the project as far as the manual labor, but managing, if I can say it, the bureaucracy of doing project management. The bigger a project is, the more paperwork and bureaucracy you have, and you're going to need people to help with that. All right. Many organizations out there have scheduling coordinators, people who are scheduling who can do what work, what day. The project manager is making sure the work gets done, but they're not actually doing the work. So somebody else is coordinating, getting that in place, getting those people to where they're supposed to be on time so that the work can happen. All right. So your project team can be made up of a number of different types of people depending on your organization and the size of the project. If you're running a NASA level project, your project team might be hundreds of people, right? Or your project team might be 5 people, just the people running the project. Now, if you're building a house, for example, you'll have the PM, the project manager. You probably have an architect. You have the financial consultants or whatever. So those are people that will be on the project team. But then you have the guys who pour cement for the foundation, the plumbers, the electricians, the drywall installers. All those people, they're not on the project team. They're not submitting change tickets. They're not managing budget. They're just doing the work. All right. So they influence just the work that's assigned to them, not the project as a whole, versus project team members that will typically influence the project as a whole. Right. So it's important that we have that separation in our mind, that we understand not every single person makes up the project team. These are just the people who are assigned to the project itself. And the reason I highlight that is when we start a project, we're going to go through a planning phase. And that planning phase is where we're thinking of what needs to get done as part of that project. We're not actually doing it yet. So if I'm building a house, and that's my project, and I'm planning, right? I don't need my drywall installers today. The house doesn't even have struts yet. This foundation's not poured. We're not going to put up drywall. I don't need the drywall installers until I'm ready for them. When I'm in the execution phase, the foundation's done, the walls are up, now I need the drywall installers. So the project team will be assigned very early in the life of the project because they're part of that planning process, right? And then when we get into execution, our project team grows if necessary, but at least our worker base grows to get that work done, to get that project moved to completion. All right, so that's our project team. Now, where do our project team members come from? Well, they come from all sorts of races and backgrounds and cultural diversity and all that. But what I mean is, if I need an accountant, where do I get them, right? Well, that really does depend on your company. Maybe you already have staff that's in place in your company that you're able to use and allocate to borrow to use for your project team, right? Or maybe you don't, and you have to hire them, right? If I'm kicking off a project and I don't have the resources, I need to go out and hire the resources. I need to hire sub-project managers or accountants, scheduling coordinators, people like that to be able to support that project. Or in a lot of larger organizations, we have something called a PMO. And a PMO is a project management office. And this is something that a small company is not going to have, right? Even a mid-sized company is probably not going to have it. But if you're a large organization, a PMO's job, the project management office's job, is to provide resources to project teams. So when we think of a project, right, Ronnie, let's think of a project for IT Pro TV. Put you on the spot here.
Yeah, can't come up with one right now off the top of my head.
Let's say that our project is to get rid of all the Macs on the set and replace them with PCs.
All right, sounds good.
So it's a joke backstage for us that our set is slowly being eaten up by Apple. We have more and more Apple equipment these days. Yeah. But so we decided that we're going to get rid of all that and go to PCs. Okay. Right. Well, somebody has to come up with that idea. Right. And that somebody has to be somebody, I want to say somebody with power, right? But it's not so much power as it is somebody with the authority to make that change, right? So if we have a mailroom clerk, which we don't, we're not that big, but if you have a mailroom clerk, they can't say, we're going to cut expenditures by 30% this year. Right. Well, you're a mailroom clerk, you're not going to do anything. You're going to put letters in mailboxes. So, but if the CEO comes down or the vice president of finance comes down or whatever and says, hey, we're going to cut expenditures. We need to do a project to find out how we're going to pull this off, right? They have the authority to do it. They become what's called the primary stakeholder. A project has stakeholders. I think I'm jumping a little bit ahead of our list. Yep. But they're the person who has a vested interest in that project. And since it's their idea, they're what's called the sponsor. So the sponsor is the person who lends their authority to the project. Project can't get done without authority to do it, and so you need a sponsor. All right. Now, in an organization with a PMO, here's how I tie it back in, the sponsor goes to the PMO and says, I've got this idea. I want to replace the Macs with PCs, or the other way around, right? I want to replace the PCs with Macs, whatever it is, right? I want to throw them all away and switch to Linux, right? So we'll do that project, right? We're going to ditch everything and just go to Linux. So the sponsor goes to the PMO and says, here's my project. I want to replace all these PCs and all these Macs with Linux, all right? I need some resources. And the PMO will say, you know what? We've got just the project manager for you. Let's assign this project manager to it, all right? The sponsor then gives authority to the project manager. And we're going to talk about that more in the initiation and planning phases later on. But they give that authority to the project manager, and the project manager can look at what the sponsor wants and start to formulate their needs. And the project manager can turn around to the PMO and say, okay, I'm going to need one scheduling coordinator, I'm going to need 2 sub-project managers, I'm going to need an accountant, and I don't need full-time attorneys, but I may need an attorney on retainer just for consultancy throughout the project. All right. And the PMO will say, okay, here's what you need, here we can give it to you. You need a web developer, all right, you can have this web developer these days, and they start to assign the resources to the project. That's the primary goal for a PMO, is management of resources. And by resources, I mean not just human resources, but also material resources. So the PMO is kind of that gateway. In fully projectized environments, the PMO may also be the ones that make the decision as to which projects to do and which ones not to do. Yeah. Ronnie, I'm having a hard time remembering the name for it. PMI doesn't hit on it, but there's this name for when a PMO in a fully projectized environment where the PMO is running the show, people submit project ideas, and the PMO will quantify those projects and rank them based on risk versus reward, cost and benefit analysis. They'll do all of that stuff to determine which projects are the most beneficial to the company and which ones aren't, and then just the ones that are the most beneficial get approved. So the PMO may actually be picking which projects your company takes, right? I've never worked in an environment that had a PMO with that much authority. Most of the places where I've worked that have had PMOs have really just been resource management. So there's different levels of project management office depending on how projectized your company is.
Yeah. Now, sometimes you actually hear that there's like 3 different terms with them. One is just the idea of being supportive, right, where they do actually just manage the resources. Other ones are as directive, as what Don just described. And then there's that mix and balance of them where again, they're working with a project manager and they're really just, again, coordinating with the project manager themselves. So when you see these types of PMOs, they could actually just be as simple as, all right, we're taking all of our project here and here's the stuff, help me project management office to figure out what I really need to do. And some of them do provide the idea of guidance. It may be a project manager that doesn't know exactly what to do, but yet they have that project management office that can help them to be able to flesh things out a little bit better.
Yeah, so that is it's a growing concept. A lot of companies are starting to adopt this concept of a PMO. There's still plenty of organizations out there that don't have a PMO at all.
Right.
All right. If you don't have a PMO, that project sponsor, when they give authority to the project manager, they're also giving them authority to reach out and grab the other resources they may need, and they'll have to coordinate that with the various departments and so on. All right. Now, I mentioned departments. Inside of a company, most companies are not projectized. Now, I used that term earlier and I didn't qualify it. The term projectized means that in a company, I almost want to jump ahead and talk about organizational structure. Let me see in my notes.
Down the line.
It's way down there, isn't it? Well, let me just try and use non-committal terms. So in your company, if your company's primary focus is performing projects, then your project managers are going to have a lot of authority, right? They're going to be people in charge of other people. But most companies aren't set up that way. Most companies are not project-driven, they're product-driven. They sell some kind of a product, and that's what makes the company money, and that's where they really put their focus. Well, remember, I said earlier in the show that what makes your company money is normally the ongoing activities, right? And so inside of a company like that, you may have project managers, but you'll typically have functional managers also. And a functional manager, that's a person who's in charge of some of those ongoing activities. And in most companies, almost every company I've worked for, the functional managers have more authority. So let's put this in IT terms, right? In the IT world, you might have a network manager, systems, like a system administrator manager, or the system admin team. You might have a chief information officer and a IT manager or IS manager. These are managerial positions that govern the ongoing operations of IT. And that manager title that they get lends them authority over all of the employees that are a part of that department. But then you have a project manager, and the project manager doesn't have any employees. Nobody answers to the project manager. The project manager is assigned projects, and then they borrow employees from these functional managers. And so project managers have to work very closely with functional managers to get things done. Because if a project manager gets mad at an employee, they can't fire them. It's not their employee. They have to go and talk to the functional manager and say, this employee is not living up to their responsibility inside of the project. And it's the functional manager that actually has authority. That's one of the biggest challenges with being a project manager, is that while you have manager in your name, you're managing the project, not necessarily the direct, direct report or whatever for any of the employees. So you don't necessarily have hire and fire responsibilities, which is
challenging.
In an employee views, that usually is what means authority. So that's a big deal. If you have a PMO, if you're fully projectized, your project managers have a lot of authority. If you're not projectized, if it's a functional organization, a business that's got a lot of ongoing activities, then you have the same authority as your sponsor. The higher up in the tree your sponsor is, the more authority you have. All right. So when it comes to these projects, I mentioned how a PMO is going to evaluate the projects and pick which ones are the most beneficial.
Right.
All right. PMI refers to this as business value. Every project has to have some kind of a business value. All right. And in IT, we have a unique perspective in IT because in other industries, like in construction, if you have a project to build a house, you're going to build this house, and then you're going to sell it for more money than the house cost, right? So your project actually makes money, and that's how most projects are. In IT, that's almost never the case, right? Most of our projects in IT cost money without generating it. So a great example would be one of the bigger projects I worked on. I worked for a bank, and we had 90 branches across 4 states, and the project was a complete network infrastructure redesign. We replaced every router, every switch, every firewall, and every communication line, every data line that was run to newer, updated hardware and faster lines, right? Complete redesign of the network. So a multi-million-dollar project. And during the life of that project, we spent some money.
Yeah.
We spent several $1 million, new equipment, new lines, and all that, all right? Did our bank sell more mortgages because we had better firewalls? No. Did our bank, get more certified deposits because our switches were layer 3 instead of just layer 2? No, right? So where we saw, an earnings, we didn't, right? But we did save money. Our data lines became less expensive, so we started getting returns every month as far as our telco bills. And then the stability of the network allowed employees to get more work done. They didn't have outages like they used to. And so that stability led to performance improvements. Not necessarily monetary improvements, and may take a while. It may take 5 years, 7 years for that investment to pay itself off, but it was the right thing to do to have the right infrastructure available to perform that service. So in IT, our projects are typically viewed as what are called cost centers, and that means they don't generate revenue, they cost money, right? And then it's other things that offset that cost. So can we sell more mortgages as a result of having new firewalls? Yes. Did the new firewalls make us money? Not necessarily, right? So that's kind of something we have to keep in mind. So for a PMO, they've got to look at your project and they've got to figure out, does it have a business value? Does it add something to our organization? Does it improve our ability to make money? Or does it help to make us more stable, right? A great example of that, disaster recovery. You might have a project to create a redundant data center for your organization. If your main data center fails, earthquake, hurricane, power outage, whatever, having another data center that can kick in and take over avoids that downtime. That data center is going to cost you a lot of money. And if you never have a disaster, you never recoup that money, right? If I have a $5 million disaster recovery facility and I never have a disaster, it's $5 million that I wasted, right? But the instant I have an earthquake and the main data center goes offline, that $5 million data center kicks in, and for every minute that it's in business, it's paying itself off, right? But does that mean that we shouldn't do that? No. How much money would we lose by having that data center offline? I read this article about how Amazon, if Amazon were to go, Amazon.com, the online shopping company, retail, whatever, if their website went down, they would lose over $1 million per hour. $1 million per hour if their website went down. So does it make sense for them to have a redundant data center if it costs them $1 million? Absolutely, because for every hour they're down, it's costing them that much. It makes sense to spend that kind of money to create that infrastructure. So definitely something that needs to be evaluated for every project.
Yeah, it's hard to see the actual value of it in terms of business until you realize the efficiencies that some of the things generate. So like, for example, our business at one point, we were just using regular telephone lines, but then we switched to a VoIP system. And by doing that, even though it actually had some upfront costs, it really did end up making it better production. We got a lot more features for what we actually had, and we were able to actually control our phone system a lot better. So it did offer some business value that we thought was worth it.
And later on, we're going to talk about cost-benefit analysis and feasibility analysis, or analyses, however you want to say it, where we'll take a look at how you make that judgment. Is it worth it? How long will it take to pay it off? Is it something that makes sense? And so we'll get a chance to see that later on. All right, now I mentioned stakeholders earlier. A stakeholder is anybody with a vested interest in the project, right? So anybody that the project influences. A stakeholder doesn't necessarily influence the project, but the project definitely influences the stakeholder. So I've mentioned two important stakeholders already. The project sponsor, the person who came up with the idea for the project, the person whose authority is allowing that project to be, that's the sponsor, and they're the primary stakeholder. All right? The project manager is also a stakeholder. They have a vested interest in the project succeeding, because if it fails, they probably get fired.
Yeah,
So
that is true.
Nobody likes the project manager when the project goes over budget.
Yeah.
So those are two stakeholders, two people who have a vested interest in the project. But there are tons of other people who are stakeholders, right? You know, the PMI specifically calls out functional stakeholders and organizational stakeholders, operational stakeholders. These are really all names for the same thing. If I have a project, let me use the insurance company as an example. So we had this project to roll out new claims processing software. All right, it was an IT department project. The IT department had to set up the servers, had to install the software, had to configure the databases, had to set up backups and restore plans. That was the project. It was an IT department project. But the software was for claims processing. And so the entire claims department was going to have to use this software. So they had to learn how to use the software. They had to understand how it operated. They had to come up with workflows for how a claim would be processed. That was stuff that the IT department didn't know, right? So while the IT department was doing all the work, the claims department was directly influenced by that project. You know, this is new software they were going to have to use. So the entire claims department becomes a stakeholder in the project. Now, you don't want every claims agent to be a part of your project, so usually it's the head of that department, or you know, if they have some mid-level managers or whatever, they become a part of the project so that they can provide feedback and influence as the project progresses. You want to get that. You want that feedback, because what you don't want is to roll out this software and then the claims department hates it, won't use it, and then you gotta, you know, roll back the project was a waste of time. So you want to get their feedback and input, and the earlier you get it, the better. You'll find as time goes on that the earlier a change occurs in a project, the less expensive it is. But the further down the road you are, change becomes really expensive, and we'll see an example of that a little bit later. All right, so stakeholders are pretty important. Just remember that the entire project team, they're stakeholders, right? But then there's other people who aren't on the project team that are also stakeholders, like the sponsor and just like any other employee that might be affected by what that project is producing. All right. Well, Ronnie, we need to talk a little bit more about terminology as far as the project manager themselves. But looking at the clock, it's a pretty good spot to stop for a break. So why don't we stop here and take a break? When we get back, we got a little more terminology before we move into something a little more interesting. So, all right, stay tuned. We'll be back in a few. All right, welcome back. So we talked about some of the different concepts as far as like project team and the project team members and stuff. Let's talk a little bit about the project manager themselves. All right. As the project manager, obviously your primary goal is making sure that any project that you manage completes successfully. And by successfully, I mean that it meets three requirements. Every project has three constraints or boundaries. You have cost, which is your budget, you know, how much money you can spend. You have time, which is your schedule, when you need to finish by. And then you have your quality, which is really your requirements list. You know, did you meet all the requirements of the project? If you met all three of those, then your project is a success. But if you failed any one of those, then your project is a failure. It's just very black and white, cut and dry, whether your project is successful or a failure. All right. So we're going to talk about those three things repeatedly throughout the show, but focusing just on project success is not the way to success, right? You know, a project manager can drive a project team too hard trying to succeed on a project and push people beyond their limits, thus leading to project failure also. So PMI calls out three specific characteristics we need to be aware of as a project manager, and they are knowledge, performance, and personal skills. All right. Knowledge is the first one. If you say you're a project manager, you need to know how to manage projects. You need to have that knowledge to understand how to recognize when a project is slipping, how to correct to get the project back on track, how to properly plan, how to evaluate risk, how to do all the various activities a project manager needs to. And if you don't know how to do any of those, you need to be committed to learning them, right? You should constantly be improving your skill set. That's why the PMP has a continuing education requirement, right? So knowledge is a big deal. Second one is performance. You need to perform at the highest levels possible. You need to be doing all that you can to help a project succeed. I used to work with a project manager years ago, and there was one project in particular, and Ronnie, you might actually remember this, you were there, where things were going wrong. There was a very good possibility for the project to fail, and the project manager at the time said, you know what, I told them this would happen, and I knew it was going to happen, and you know what, I'm just going to let it happen. I'm just going to let it fail. You know, I told them so. Well, you know what? You're the project manager.
Yeah.
Make it happen. You know, fix it. Get it back on the line. Make sure people are aware. If you take that attitude of it's not my fault, well, you're the project manager. Everything is your fault.
Yeah.
That, you know, it stinks, but that's how it is. If the project fails, it is your fault. You're a project manager. You've got to find a way to bring things in line. If you planned properly from the beginning, then it's very difficult for the project to fail.
Yeah.
Usually project failures stem from poor planning.
Yeah.
So, or bad personal judgment. Yeah, there's a few things there.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is personal skills. A project manager may or may not actually have authority over employees. You may not have hire fire responsibilities. You might not even have write-up responsibilities. You might simply be in charge of the project itself and not necessarily the people. That means that you're going to be reliant on your personal skills to be able to negotiate getting activities done. Yeah. This is the hardest part for IT guys, right? Because personal is the last thing we are.
Yeah. So in the for us, right, it requires us then to be actually people that are interpersonal as well, and that actually requires us to have a lot of good skills to make sure that we can accomplish what we need to. Because we may lack the actual authority to do what we need, they do rely on you as a project manager to move things forward, and that means that you are actually not only the idea that the person that has the knowledge to do it, not only are they able to perform, but you have to be the one that motivates. You have to be the one that can actually carry them to tell them, especially when there's a long project ahead of them and there are many ups and downs. So as a project manager, it's incumbent upon us to actually develop some of these interpersonal skills.
All right, so I've got the official PMI list. I made some notes during the break. So let's take a look at these. These are all very important. So you'll see, Ronnie, you mentioned leadership, right? Lead by example. If you're doing a poor job, if you're not committed, you don't care, neither is your team. You know, they're not going to care either. So you've got to make sure that you are always exercising good leadership. Team building.
Yeah.
When you start a project, you're getting people from all over the company. In many cases, people who have never even met before. To get them working the best, you need to have a good team mentality. And we're going to talk about some of the team building processes later on, the whole storming, norming, performing, all that good stuff. So we'll get a chance to see those. But this is another key aspect and really one of the more important ones for a project manager.
Yeah. Same thing goes true with the idea of motivation, right? There's a lot of times where you're presented with the idea and you think it's not going to be so great, but it does take someone to come in and show you not only the value, but the idea of getting behind it and why you want to do this and what ends up happening here. So the great thing is, we actually work with somebody that's really motivational. He says, "Do it or you're fired." No, no, but very positive and always brings in different books and different aspects of, you better watch this because it's really going to motivate you. And again, that gets you on board, and that's what you want. You want everybody to be on board to understand why this needs to be done. So motivation is an important factor for us.
Communication is another one that's a big deal. What you'll find, especially here with the PMP, we're going to show you how the official ways of collecting data and representing that data. And so we're going to see things like Pareto charts and stuff like that, that as a project manager, we're used to. We see that stuff, we've worked with it, find Gantt charts, right? We live and die off of Gantt charts. But outside of the project management world, people don't use Gantt charts, right? People don't use Pareto diagrams. They just don't see it. Fishbone diagrams. Those are ones that you just don't see outside of project management. So we need a way to take our project management status and update information and properly communicate that to the people in a way that they understand. And when we're receiving information from people, we need to be able to communicate to ask the right questions to get the information we need. The more information we have, the better our odds of success.
Yeah, and this communication skills goes beyond the idea of just orally communicating, as well as to good written communication skills.
And interpretive
as well.
dance.
And interpretive dance, of course. It is important. I think with fans, I think is what's needed.
When you said it goes beyond like oral communication, immediately my mind went to that movie Blades of Glory, where they're doing the ice skating and the bird costume.
Yeah.
And oh, all right. So maybe not interpretive dance. All right. We also got influencing.
Yeah.
If you do not have direct authority, if you do not have hire and fire responsibilities, if your project sponsor is the CEO, you're not going to have authority over these people. You cannot tell them what to do, but you can influence them. And that's one of the things. If we can sit down with somebody, explain our side, get them to understand, we can influence them to make the decisions that we recognize as necessary. So influencing is a key aspect of any kind of project management role.
Yeah. The idea of decision making here, tell you how good of a decision maker I am. Every day, if Nate comes in and asks if I brought lunch or not, and I say no, I want to go somewhere, both of us just say, where do you want to go? We don't have a clue on what decision we actually want to make at that point. But no, as a project manager, right, the decision that you make, again, actually is dependent upon you. So making a good decision, an informed decision, is something that you have to be willing to do, okay? Not being willing to take the risk is not something that a project manager should not be willing to do. They, should go through and make sure that they take a look at everything and then make the decision that needs to be made and be willing to live with it.
One of my early mentors, a gentleman that I worked for several years, he taught me a lesson. He said, decision making is all about timing. That if you want to have all of the information necessary to make a decision, you'll wait forever to make that decision. You'll stall and stall and stall. And stalling, in a way, is its own decision. You've decided to do nothing. So what he always said was the art to decision making is recognizing when you've got enough information to make a decision. And he said there comes a point where you need to make a decision and move on, right? Right or wrong, just make a decision. If it's the right decision, great, you acted, you move forward. If it's the wrong decision, by making it early, you'll likely have time to correct for it. Versus if you had waited and waited and waited and then made the wrong decision, you might not be able to correct for it. So make a decision. Any gray areas going into a project are room for failure, right? So you want to have well-defined boundaries, and that really does require decision making. You also have to have ownership of that decision, right? Take responsibility. If a decision turns out bad, you need to show, and we'll talk about this in some of the very last episodes when we do closing, you need to show why you made that decision. What was the information you had? What was the information you didn't have? And oftentimes the information you didn't have just wasn't available. And so it's not that you made a bad decision, you made the best decision with the information that was available at the time. So, understanding that, taking ownership, taking responsibility, that is important. All right, also political and cultural awareness. Now, this is not a specific requirement of project management, but PMI is very proactive and progressive about ensuring that all of our projects are multicultural, that we are aware of the various influences that people have inside of the project, as well as being diverse, right? So we need to understand that in today's world, project teams may not all be in one building working together. They might be spread all across the earth. And you'll have different religions, different cultures, different holidays, different calendars, all sorts of things like that we need to coordinate. We need to understand the political and cultural environment that surrounds our project and act appropriately within it, right? And that's a very important thing, not just for project managers, but really for anybody these days.
Yeah. A lot of this you might go, well, why does this really influence us? Well, when it comes down to planning, especially on those religious or cultural holidays, you've got to actually remember some of this stuff as your project begins to move forward. And again, sensitivity to that is pretty much a key for us as well. Yep.
Next on our list is negotiation. In small and medium companies, it is not uncommon at all for a project manager to be the one negotiating contracts. So when you're establishing vendors to perform work or setting up long-term agreements or whatever, as a project manager, you might need to negotiate. You're negotiating a price for a service, right? So a price for getting something done, or maybe materials, depending on what you're doing. In large organizations, they will typically have professional negotiators.
Right.
Now, I don't mean like the cool SWAT team negotiator that's talking the guy down from the building. You know, at the bank, we had a negotiator. She was awesome. She was this little, soft-spoken Asian woman. She was so nice when you talked to her in the hallway. But if you heard her on the phone with somebody, boy, I mean, I would not want to be on the other end of that call. She could negotiate and just get the price down on darn near anything.
Yeah.
And so she did a great job of making sure that our company didn't spend too much for what we were getting done, and that we were always getting the best price possible. Yeah. That was her job. She was really good. She was way better at it than I would ever be. And so it was nice to have her. If I ever needed something like that, I sent it on over to her. But in small and medium organizations, you're not likely to have a staff negotiator or a contract specialist or whatever you want to call them. So in that case, it's you. And you need to make sure that you have good negotiation skills. You need to understand, and we'll talk again more on this later, but you need to understand that when you beat somebody down on price, if you make it so that it's no longer profitable for them, they're not going to give you their best effort. So one of the skills of being a negotiator is making sure that you establish a nice middle ground, right? If your project sponsor has a list of requirements that are unrealistic, you need to negotiate to get those requirements down to something that is realistic and achievable, right? So that's part of negotiations anytime you interact. But we also use that with conflict management, which is down two more. When you have multiple parties that are part of your project and they're in conflict, negotiation is one of the methods for resolving that conflict. There's actually a total of 5 methods on the exam, but negotiation is one of them.
Yeah. So the last two really go together as well. The idea of coaching as well as trust building here is, again, bringing everything together in the way that it needs to be. A lot of times with the coaching, of course, if your team members do not have the actual clear path to get through, you as a coach, that is your role at that particular point in helping them to be able to do that. Building the trust actually inspires the rest of the team, of course, to know that, hey, the rest of the team is taking care of you and you're taking care of them, and so everything is actually good and that we're going to accomplish this project together. So having all these skills combined is really kind of the main focus of what you need interpersonally, because if you think about it, your project management skills, even though as good as you are on paper, where it really shines is when you work with people. And that's what we actually have to remember, is that we're really dealing with people here, and that means it is incumbent upon you as a project manager to be able to have these skills in hand. Yeah.
And now let's say I'm working a project and Ronnie's been assigned to it, and you know he's just not cutting the mustard. He's slouching on the job. He's not getting a lot of work done. As a project manager, I've got 2 choices. Choice number 1, I could just cut Ronnie from the project, right? Turn him back into the PMO.
That's it.
And what are they going to do? They're going to assign him to some other project where he'll probably do the same, right? Ronnie is a big slacker.
That's right.
So, or I could coach Ronnie.
Yeah.
I could coach him to make sure he understands what his responsibilities are, what's expected of him. Some people just don't know what's expected of them. And so I can coach him to make him a better employee. If I just cut him from my project, all I'm doing is pawning him off on the next project manager. And so it's going to be this constant burden on project after project. Versus if you can coach somebody, make them a better employee, make them a better team member, then not only do you benefit, but the next project manager and the ones beyond. And if you build a rapport with that person, maybe you continue to have them as part of your project team.
Yeah.
All right, now the last thing I want to call out here is not a soft skill, but something that is very important, which is the code of ethics. The Project Management Institute has a published code of ethics that, one, if you're a certified, a PMI certified individual, if you have your PMP or CAPM or whatever, you are required to follow the PMI code of ethics. All right, failure to do so will result in your certification being revoked. All right, if you are not a PMI certified person, then you don't have to follow the code of ethics, but it's on the exam, so you're going to want to know it. But it's also just a good idea in general. The Code of Ethics is on their website. You can download it. If you go to PMI's website, so here I am on PMI.org, you can go to About. And on the About screen, you will see, here it is, Read the PMI Code of Ethics. And when we go into the Code of Ethics, on the right side, you'll see where you can download the Code of Ethics in multiple languages. I'll do English. I could go crazy. I'll go Chinese today. Let's have some fun. All right, so here we go. And basically what it does is it lays out the code of ethics. Now, the reason I highlight this here, a lot of people don't realize this, but the code of ethics is on the exam. This is testable material. So the exam comes from the PMBOK as well as the code of ethics. Now, the code of ethics, if you buy the physical PMBOK, the code of ethics is actually in the back of the PMBOK, so it's kind of all in one. But if you get the digital version like I have, you've got to get the digital version of the code of ethics. But it is free. You just go and download it. It shows who it applies to, and you'll see all PMI members as well as those holding a certification. And then basically here, it gets into our responsibilities, right? We need to make sure that we follow certain standards. We only accept assignments that we have the necessary experience, skills, and qualifications for, right? I talked about that earlier, that you have the knowledge to perform that activity. That we take actions based on the best interest of society, public safety, and the environment. And it goes on to list continuing things. These are all different aspects that we need to follow, that we need to basically make sure that we're acting in the best interest of our customer or our company, that we avoid the appearance of impropriety, right? That's in here somewhere, which is just a fancy way of saying, one, don't do bad things,
right.
And two, even if you're not, avoid the appearance that you might be doing something bad, all right? So for example, as a project manager, you may be in charge of a project budget, right? So let's say you're working a multi-million-dollar project and you're responsible for that budget. Could you go to the bank and cut yourself a check for $2 million and walk out? Yes, you have that authority, right? So your books, your accounting books, they're going to be monitored, right? Any expenditures, any money that comes out of the accounts, you need to record and show how it's tied to the project, all right? Now, if you're not embezzling, because that's what they call it when you steal money from your company. If you're not embezzling, and you've got your books, you're keeping everything up to date, and an auditor comes and says, "Let me see your books," and you say, "No, I don't want to show them to you," and you stall and you push them away and you don't let them look at your books, what are they going to think? They're going to think, here's somebody who has something to hide, right? They must be doing something wrong. They don't want me to see the books. In reality, maybe it just means you didn't update the books. Maybe you're behind or whatever. Maybe you're running a little over budget. You don't want people to know because you're going to correct for it later. Either way, you've created the appearance of impropriety, and that's as bad as actually doing the impropriety itself. So we need to make sure that we always act in a transparent manner, that we let people know where we're at, that we truly report the progress of our project. If we're behind schedule, you tell people you're behind schedule. You don't try and hide the fact and mask that. These are all things that are a part of the code of ethics. Everything here under mandatory standards are things that you must do. If you're caught not adhering to any one of these, you will have your certification and your membership revoked. All right. There are other standards in here, though, that are not requirements, that are more like guidelines, things that you should be doing, but especially that section where it says, requirements. You need to adhere to those. But you'll see other things here, negotiating good faith. In other words, if you're building a house and you need drywall installers and your brother-in-law is a drywall installer, that you don't just automatically give the bid to them, right? That you do a bid, you get we get responses from various contractors, and if your brother-in-law has the best bid, then you pick them. But if they don't have the best bid, you pick the other person, right? You make sure that you negotiate in good faith. So these are things that are pretty standard. Most of them are common sense, right? But it is on the exam. We're not allowed to talk about what questions were on the exam, but I know that I had several code of ethics questions that were on the exam, and so it's testable material. The book itself is 8 pages, I think. 8 pages. So it only takes a minute to read. It's free. Definitely get it. If you become a PMI member, they send this to you in paper, so you actually have a handheld copy you can look at. But make sure you make it part of your study materials. You need to be aware of what's in here. And like I said, most of it is pretty straightforward. And this is just appendix stuff here at the end, so it's really 6 pages. No reason not to read that, and they should be easy questions on the exam.